Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. My name is Andrea Flores, and I'm assistant professor in the Department of Education. And I have the honor and privilege today to introduce Dr. Fernando Stein, who is the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Stein is a practicing pediatrician and critical care specialist, delivering bedside care for the past 35 years in Houston. A native of Guatemala, he did his specialty and subspecialty training at Baylor College of Medicine, affiliated institutions. His areas of research have included patient and family communications in clinical environments and mechanism of death in children with severe neurological disabilities. Dr. Stein has been an advocate for children in impoverished environments at the global level as a member of the technical advisors for the integrated management of childhood illnesses of the Pan American Health Organization. And he has so many awards and achievements that we wouldn't be able to hear him talk if I listed them all now. But please join me in welcoming Dr. Fernando Stein.
Thank you, Andrea, and I want to thank you all on behalf of the institutions that I represent, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Baylor College of Medicine, and Texas Children's Hospital. And I do want to recognize a very special friend, Dr. Alejandro Flores, who is a pediatric gastroenterologist at Harvard, who was a classmate of mine from kindergarten through medical school. We are like brothers, and the mischief and havoc we were able to cause is what has us in the United States instead of Guatemala. I am very grateful for the invitation to Professor Flores, and I will talk a little bit about what I've been doing as pediatrician and as president of the American Academy of Pediatrics in working with immigrant children and families. And I call it in the first person because it is very personal for each family. I have nothing to disclose, as that says. You may wonder, what is a pediatrician working with this type of situation? And I think I should explain to you what has happened with the practice of pediatrics nationally. And what has happened is that the office of the pediatrician has become a thermometer of society. When I practiced general pediatrics, the idea was to control mortality caused by infections and severe illness, and that's what drove me into critical care. But in the pediatrician's office, we were seeing mostly what you see on the left side of the screen, which is pediatricians were giving vaccinations, treating infectious diseases, doing vision, hearing screening, some sexual, social, and educational issues, and neurodevelopmental issues, and obesity. And as time has gone by, pediatricians in their office are seeing a cross-section of what's happening in society, from food insecurity to poverty to violence, drugs, truancy, fear and terror, incipient non-communicable diseases. I'll spend a minute on that. And really other areas that are very complex. I call it the benignification of exposures and behaviors, which is because marijuana is legal, therefore it is harmless, is the conversion that has been made at a social level, and it is clearly harmful for the developing brain and also for the mature brain from the neurophysiologic standpoint. And then all of the business of the very violent exposures to pornography and decapitations and crimes that are now a click away. And children of any age, by accident or will, can click and they will see things that no human being should see. And as Marshall McLuhan said, we cannot unsee what we have seen, and we cannot unhear what we have heard. So the mortality in children of all ages has gone down. But in the group 0 to 5 years of age, over the past 70 years, mortality has dropped by 70% since 1950, which is an amazing drop in mortality. During the same period of time, there has been an increase in life expectancy, and we're feeling very comfortable about it. But when you look at what that is and what that looks like, I want you to focus first on the blue lines and go to the United States. And you will see that healthy life expectancy in 1990 was between 62, 63 years of age. And then for women, it was about a little more. But when you look at the dark blue, you see an increase in healthy life expectancy from 1990 to 2013 that goes up only about a couple of years. And then the additional years of ill health are additional years, but we're not healthy as we get older. And this is the result of diseases that begin in childhood: obesity, heart disease, lung disease. The list is very long, hypertension. And the pediatrician is a witness of this beginning, but we are not heard. And I will finish my presentation with a reflection on that, so that when we look at the increase in life expectancy that had been going up until 2015 when it started to go down. But you can see that the increase in additional years of ill health is what has happened between the year 1990 and 2013. So as we conquered infant mortality, we started looking at all of the collection of diseases that we call in public health non-communicable diseases. And I started working with violence, mostly gun violence, because in addition to having been the victim of it when we were in Guatemala, you know what's happening in the United States. And the numbers that I want you to remember today, I just published a column on this, is the number 91 twice. 91 people are being killed every day in the United States by gunshots. But listen to this one. 91% of children shot in the world are in the United States. That's the number 91 twice. So as I was working on violence against children, I ended up looking at the violence that being displaced represents. And as we sit here today, we have 60 million people worldwide who have been forcibly displaced. Less than 1% will get the chance to start a new life. Those are the numbers. But of this 60 million, 51% are less than 18 years of age. They are children. And this is really a very sobering number because of this population. They represent 31% of the total world population are children. So children below 18 years of age. So you can begin to appreciate how a pediatrician would get involved with this, because the absolute numbers demand our attention. I don't need to tell you, I will call you people of privilege, because we are, that there are two worlds of childhood. One is the child on the left. This is my grandson, whom I adore with both my central and peripheral nervous system. And then there are the children from the other world, the world of the very poor and the ones that are really experiencing abject violence and troubles. Very quickly, because I know that, as I told Andrea Flores yesterday, I'm not preaching to the choir here, I'm preaching to the Pope. You guys are experts on this, so I'll be quick. But I wanted to make sure that we use the same terminology. So you know what an immigrant is, but it's foreign born. It includes naturalized citizens and lawful permanent residents. I will have you know that 35% of pediatricians practicing in the United States are foreign medical graduates and foreign born. And 65% of them, of the practicing pediatricians, have either one or more than one parent who was born outside of the United States. This terminology includes refugees, asylees, persons with temporary visa, and unauthorized immigrants. And then there is the immigrant families, which are first-generation immigrant children, any foreign-born child, second-generation immigrant children, any native-born child with at least one foreign-born parent, which is that group of pediatricians that I mentioned. Migrant is any person who lives temporarily or permanently in a country where he or she was not born And then the term migrant should be understood as covering all cases where the decision to migrate is taken freely, which excludes a lot of the people we're going to talk about today. And for reasons of personal convenience and without intervention of an external compelling factor. The UN definition of a refugee is there for you to read, and you know that the United States came out of the Refugee Convention last week. And an asylum seeker is different from a refugee in that the asylum seeker has applied for protection as a refugee and is awaiting determination of his or her status. And a refugee is the term used to describe a person who has already been granted protection. And this is where a lot of the migrant children and their families are in a mud, that has been confused greatly. These are the numbers that occupy us, and we'll touch briefly on some of them. And this is where the world's displaced people are being hosted. That's the words that we use. But 16% are in the Americas, not only the United States, 30% in Africa, 20% the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. 55% of refugees worldwide came from 3 countries: South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Syria. And then the 3 R's, which is the goal. Return, if the conflict's resolved, some refugees may be able to return to their homeland. Remain, some refugees are forced to live as second-class citizens in the cities which they fled. They live in poverty typically, with limited access to work, education, and healthcare. And then resettle, which is a fraction of refugees that win the bureaucratic lottery and are able to move to a third country like the US, where they have the opportunity to establish new homes. And this is the changes in the origins of refugees in the United States. Just to put us in the frame, look at the minimal number of cases from Latin America as refugees. And I'll mention in a few minutes why I think that these numbers are what they are, but they are not correctly recorded. And these are the top US states for resettling refugees in 2016. And you have some around the neighborhood. You see Vermont and... Okay. So the largest resettled refugees group by state of initial resettlement from 2007 to 17, and you can see the different groups in this slide. And then the religious composition of refugees admitted to the US during the same 10 years. And you can see an increase, very slow, of Muslim refugees. And then we have the very complex situation of the DACA and DAPA persons that I will touch on a little later as well. So the Defer Action for Childhood Arrivals, on September the 5th, the administration announced that they would be rescinding the DACA program. And I'm sure you have followed this on the news. DACA allows undocumented immigrants who enter the country as minors to receive a renewable 2-year period of deferred action from deportation and eligibility for a work permit. All of that is in limbo right now, and if the bipartisan bicameral DREAM Act is not officially sanctioned by Congress, we will have a major issue with large numbers of young men and women that many of us know personally. The American Academy of Pediatrics has taken a very strong stance on this issue. We have issued op-eds, press statements, testimony, and I have personally testified on this issue because in addition to being unfair and almost I don't know what the adjective would be. I better not use one. But if I tell you that I'm going to give you my information and you're going to treat me with dignity and you're not going to harm me, and then with that very information you try to get to me, that has a name. The unaccompanied children. Why in the world they chose the word ICE, I have no idea. But that represents really what they are. And it's the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And we are in the middle of this search where they have targeted undocumented parents and sponsors of newly arrived unaccompanied children. The Trump administration argues that an unaccompanied child's journey to the U.S. poses a humanitarian threat. They have been equated to human trafficking and characterizes the actions of their parents as smuggling. We had a recent case in Houston two cases that I will mention in just a moment. The AAP sent a letter to the Department of Department of Homeland Security urging them to immediately end the initiative, and of course, they didn't listen. And the Trump administration proposing to change existing protection for unaccompanied children, asylum seekers, and special immigrant juveniles, all of this is disappearing. The sensitive locations. There was an understanding during the Obama administration that there were certain areas where the immigration authorities would not go. Churches, clinics, hospitals, places of worship that were not churches, schools, playgrounds. All of these were sensitive locations. And the case that you see on the right happened at my hospital, and we have the suspicion that someone from within called the authorities. So the family was waiting for this child that was going to have surgery, and they called the immigration authorities and they picked up the parents and left the kid alone in the hospital and the parents detained. And a week later, there was a case where in Corpus Christi, Texas, a girl who had come to the United States at the age of 3 months that had cerebral palsy, that was non-communicative, really a very severely neurologically damaged girl, had, I think she was 11, had cholecystitis and had to have surgery, so she was taken from where she lived to Corpus Christi. But because they have these checkpoints, they stopped the ambulance, and the family, smart enough, sent an uncle who was a legal resident with a girl. The girl was not a legal resident. So the immigration authorities followed the ambulance with a patrol car and put a 24-hour guard on her at the hospital when she was recovering from surgery. Now, this is a brain-damaged kid that cannot go anywhere, even if she wanted. And there they were with guns and everything. And the Academy protested vehemently about this, and in the case of the girl with cerebral palsy, the family got some kind of relief. But there is an attitude that really is permeating the prosecution of families and children that are here illegally to a level that I will express my own opinion, and it's that of the Academy, is unreasonable given the threat that these people represent to our society. This is a poster that they put at some of the New York hospitals, which is really something that we would like to believe, but we cannot guarantee, which is no hate, no fear. Refugees and immigrants are welcome here. In theory, the immigration authorities will not go to the hospital, will not go to your clinic or your office, unless they have a warrant that has a person. We are looking for Fernando Stein, who we know to be in it, and he's here, but not like just a raid to see who they can catch. The administration has announced that they will be reducing the number of refugees allowed to settle in the U.S. to a new limit of 45,000 or less than half the current limit. And then in March, news circulated that the Department of Homeland Security was proposing separating immigrant mothers and their children when they arrive at the U.S. border. The AAP issued a statement opposing this action, and the Department of Homeland Security officials say they are no longer considering this policy. And finally, a little bit about the public charge. In order for people to apply for relief or citizenship or a clarification of their status for visa, they analyze if you're going to be a public charge. So I'll give you an example. I have a cousin who is in Houston. He's lived there for 20 years. He's been the Consul General of Guatemala in Houston for 20 years. And he has a daughter who is blind. She was blinded by prematurity. She's 22. On the day of the flood, of the hurricane, they lost their house and their dog, the girl's dog that she uses to get around. And shortly after, the government of Guatemala decided to move him to LA. So he's considering leaving the diplomatic service and applying for permanent status as an immigrant in the United States. He's requesting a visa. But his daughter will be considered, but may represent a public charge because she's blind. And he may therefore not be allowed to stay with his daughter because that represents an unreasonable expense to the taxpayer of the United States. That's just an example that's close to home. So the people that would be affected are, of course, immigrant families, those with U.S. citizen children, refugees. You can read the rest. So the AAP has joined the Protecting Immigrant Families campaign, Advancing Our Future, which intends to defend against this and other threats to immigrant families. And then there are campaign subcommittees actively engaged in preparation for an announcement by the Trump administration that we think is going to come soon, that is going to expand things even further. So now something else has developed, and I didn't know exactly how to weave this into the presentation, but when I started working with unaccompanied minors in the border between Texas and Mexico, they were capturing about 100 a day. Towards the end of 2016, they were capturing about 1,000 a day. I'll show you some photographs of that. And so the facilities couldn't hold many. And there are multiple prisons that were built privately, and they were hosting prisoners that didn't work so far. They escaped easily. So now they are licensing these detention facilities as child care centers for unaccompanied minors. They're jails. In terms of the threats and opportunities in the states, 25 states cover with Medicaid and CHIP immigrant children lawfully residing in the United States. And of course, you know that CHIP is right now in limbo as well. And 6 states and DC provide Medicaid coverage regardless of immigrant status. So, as we look at the cultural humility and cultural safety that we as pediatricians need to offer these children, treat and prevent the communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases that these children suffer, and look after their emotional well-being, I am reminded of the advocacy and policy dedication that we need to have as academicians, but also as what I call the biology of hope. You can see this mama bear surrounded by their 3 cubs in a defiant posture. And this is pretty much what the parents of all of these unaccompanied children are facing as they consider sending them to the north. The flight of children from wherever they are is something that mankind has done for a long time, trying to save their young. And this is the flight of children from the Spanish Civil War, where most of the children that left went to Latin America. and they went and they left alone. I have an uncle, Tio Nino, who left during that time, and they were fleeing the massacres against children that you see in this photograph. They were killing lots of kids. And then during the Second War, and shortly thereafter and before, there was the kinder transport, where children were sent from Germany to principally London, but other countries as well, in order to save the young. Because families face the terrible choice of keeping my children here and having them die from bullet or famine, or risk sending them to the north. So children don't travel thousands of miles on a whim. Imagine the idea of walking from Honduras to Texas, walking, or in trains, or hitching rides, or being turned over to a coyote. So there is an area that we call the Trifinio, which is the triangle between Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, where there has been, in addition to abject poverty, a lot of gang activity as a result of the deportation from the United States of many gangsters, and families are sending their kids away because of this. And they go to the border between Guatemala and Mexico, and they get on this train that it is called by the immigrants the Beast, La Bestia. And you can see how they climb on it. And of course, this is a wink-wink, because the engineer of the train gets money from each one of them, and this is coordinated by the coyotes, and this is truly smuggling. But they risk their life to get here. But I submit to you that children do not immigrate, they flee. They're not coming here because they want to come here, because they want to go to school or something. They are fleeing for their life. So as a result, because there is a country between Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, which is called Mexico, and the United States, they qualify as refugees. You cannot apply for refugee if you're in the next country. But if you have one between, you can. And this is the apprehensions of children and their families, and they exceed those of unaccompanied children in 2016. And this is totals in 14, 15, and 16, divided in color by the countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. So in the 3 years, what we saw in Texas was about 150,000 children and unaccompanied children that came through our streets and our border. That's a lot of kids. So a group that included some of the faces that you will find here, Dr. Linton, Dr. Shapiro, Dr. Dreyer, and others, we went to try to get into the detention centers, and it took us 4 months to gain access. It resulted in a publication led by Julie Linton, Marcia Griffin, and Alan Shapiro, of a policy statement about the detention of immigrant children, and we have treated this as one of the top priorities in the American Academy of Pediatrics, and you will see why. These kids have come through the desert. They have come through the river. And then they are close to the guards, and it's not really that they get captured. They turn themselves in. And as they turn themselves in, you will see these images. They are taken to the detention center, and they are disrobed. All their possessions are taken away, and all go in a plastic bag, and with their name, and they're given the little uniform of the place. They get asked if they have a relative in the United States, or if they have a name or a number. Many of them have painted with tar a telephone number on their chest and their name. And let me tell you, that's one of those images that I would like to unsee, and I can't. After that, they get separated by age and gender. Age first, and the age separation goes adolescence and pre-adolescence. And it is determined that somebody is an adolescent if they lift their armpit and they have hair, that's an adolescent. If they don't, they are pre-adolescent. And then by gender, male, female. So the screams of a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old girl that is separated from the hand of the brother with whom she walked from Honduras to Texas are horrible. And they don't know what's going to happen. They simply get separated and they are moved into the facility, which is, I have some photographs to show. It's forbidden to take photographs. And this is, I want to say a word about the guards. The guards are, many of them are immigrants themselves or children of immigrants, so they are not mean. They're doing their job. They do it with a certain degree of kindness, but they're doing a horrible job. It's like they have to process them. Now, look at the situation here. This is the detention center. They're given mylar blankets, and you have 1,000 children in this facility. But imagine if you put 1,000 children in a room, in a big room in a gymnasium or a school. Within 5 minutes, they're running, screaming, spitting at each other, playing, who knows what. And here, they're laying down but not sleeping, immobile, like scared animals. As they are being processed, imagine 1 bag, 2 bags, 3 bags, 100 bags, 1,000 bags, a mountain of bags that is evocative of what you've seen in the documentaries of concentration camp or in the Holocaust Museum. And then they are put in here waiting for their processing. Processing consists that the guards ask him, so you have a member? Yeah, my uncle in Milwaukee, okay? They call. This is the detention center of Ursula. That's the name of it. We have your little niece and your little nephew. If we send him to you, do you promise to present him to the courts within 30 days? And they say yes. Okay. So they give him a bus ticket, each one a bus ticket, and they put him out on the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning, because they have to clear the center for the next wave. So what has happened in Harlingen, Del Rio, and McAllen is that the community has gathered to help these people out of volunteerism. So they park a bus in front of the Ursula Center, and as the bus fills with these kids that are coming out at all hours of day and night, say tonight is the turn of, I was at the Sacred Heart Church. And the volunteers know that tonight they have a shift, and they are waiting there, and the driver calls, I have a bus load, I'm coming. So the volunteers line up in 2 lanes, and as the children and families walk in, they are received with applause so that they feel welcome. And then they're fed hot soup, and they're offered a warm shower and a clean set of clothes. And following that, they get reprocessed in a humane way. And they get asked, so you're going to Milwaukee, that's going to be 3 days in the bus. And you're 14, you need at least 6 bottles a day of water. And you need non-perishable items. Or you are a 15-year-old girl, you need some hygienic matters. So they are given a little backpack and their water and their food, and off they go. They call it la hielera or la perrera, which is the ice box or the dog pound, because look at the wires, and the lights are kept on 24/7, and the temperature is kept at 68 for reasons of, they say, hygiene, so that it doesn't smell. That's what they say. So they are very cold. And then if you don't have a number, if you don't have a relative, if you just went with the wave, they fall into the detention centers really detained now. And this one had been 3 years in detention because they fall in a limbo, and if there is no one advocating for them, that's where they are. And then there are the volunteers who are from all avenues of life, from all religions, from all really people. So what this taught me was the two extremes of the human heart, the very good and the very bad. But these volunteers are really amazing, and this is the smiles that you're likely to find. So now we are in the next phase of the extermination of immigrants, is what I call it, the raids. And you can see these are real photographs. I took them from the New York Times website. You can see a girl where a bunch of migrant workers are being raided. But this is the attitude of the American public regarding migrant children. And you can see here that it's just in my age bracket that is only 50% who are disposed to offer shelter and support while beginning the process of detention, but the majority of Americans think that it's something that we should do. So when General Kelly declared that they were going to separate children from their families, the flood stopped. But it stopped not in the way that they stopped leaving the area of the triangle. They stopped coming to the United States, and guess where they are? In Mexico. And Mexico is ill-prepared to take care of these kids, very ill-prepared. And I've already been there with the Mexican Society of Pediatrics and whatnot, and the situation down there is terrible. These are children. These are not a threat to society. This is what you're seeing in Mexico. I didn't want to leave the northern border untouched, but it's very interesting because what's happening in Mexico is a little bit of what we're seeing here. You can see the people that are fleeing the United States illegally towards Canada, the upswing. So as we started looking at the issues of violence and all of that, I urge our colleagues and many others in the American Academy of Pediatrics to get out of our offices and advocate, because we could no longer be comfortable in the secrecy of our offices and clinics and ignore something of major social consequences, like the communicable diseases, the violence, all the list that I gave you, and this humanitarian crisis. So the Academy came out with a series of policies that were widely distributed and known by the media, and you can see it here, that all immigrant children and families be treated with dignity and respect. Children not be exposed to conditions or settings that may re-traumatize them, such as the ones that currently exist. That children never be separated from a parent or primary caregiver unless there are concerns that they are a safety to the child. When in custody, children should be provided with child-friendly orientation and regular updates on their status. I mean, if it would be traumatic to anyone here to be taken, separated from your loved one, and then not told what's going to happen, what your rights are, or when it's going to happen, you just and go, that's really scary. The Department of Homeland Security should discontinue the use of family detention and instead use community-based alternatives. I know there must be a few bad apples in that crowd, agreed, but look at them. Tell me that they are the threat that our society has right now. Children should receive timely, comprehensive medical care. They don't get any. They get asked if they feel okay. Have you ever asked a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old, do you feel okay? Yes, then they are fine. In terms of release from detention, because that's, you know, if it were not for the families and the churches and the people in those towns that are not very rich, that are volunteering to help the families, we could be having horrible situations happening. So all immigrant children seeking safe haven should have access to comprehensive health care and insurance coverage. Funding should be expanded to post-release services, not because what we're spending is on expanded detention. We don't even give them a vaccine. Pediatricians should be familiar with basic forms of legal relief and be able to ask targeted history that help uncover key events that can contribute to legal relief. I would say that over 95% of the children that I have interviewed qualify for refugee. No further questions. I mean, the brother was shot, the mother was killed. I mean, no child should ever represent themselves in court. I mean, some of the things we're saying are kind of laughable that we're even saying it, but they do not have the right to have legal representation. And often you see a 10-year-old representing himself in court. We have agreed in the Academy that hope is not a strategy. So we have engaged our pediatricians nationally to build coalitions, to mobilize our members, and to speak out for child health. Be first, be right, be credible. Pediatricians have amplified our efforts. We did something that really has changed a little bit the way in which we are being able to influence Congress, and it's what is called the Group of Six. The Group of Six is the American Academy of Pediatrics, American College of Physicians, American Academy of Family Practice, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, American Osteopathic Association, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Between the six organizations, we represent a little bit over 65% of the practicing physicians in this country. There are a little less than 1 million physicians in the country, and with this group we represent 65%. That's 3 times the AMA. So when we have visited the Hill, people are paying attention because we not only represent ourselves, but our patients. So if you figure about 3,000 patients per doctor, do the numbers. Now, Chuck Schumer asked the right question because we were feeling very strong and, you know, we can influence 3,000 per. I said, but do you really talk to your patients about these things? No politician. We have engaged chapters, committee sections, and certainly we produce over 100 pediatrician videos from 33 states. You can see that in the effort to keep coverage, we reach 20 million viewers, and we really have not relented in doing this work because it's the right thing to do, because it's the obligation of us as pediatricians. And the AAP response has been covered. The American Academy of Pediatrics is being mentioned more often than it used to be in the deliberations between congressmen and senators, and even in the debates that you hear now, which you didn't hear before, and the Academy of Pediatrics says da-da-da. So I want to finish with the history of Cassandra. You are scholars. Do you know the myth of Cassandra in Greek mythology was the most beautiful woman in Greece, and Apollo, who had a proclivity for mortals, comes to her and says that if she agrees to be his sexually in the future, that he will give her the ability to foretell, the ability to make prophecy. And she says yes. And she starts making prophecy and becomes very famous and very prominent and very rich, because kings and queens and generals would ask what was going to happen, and she would tell them, and that happened. And then one day Apollo returns and says, I'm here for that deal that we talked about. And Cassandra says, no thanks. I've decided to remain a virgin. And Apollo, of course, is furious, and he says, I cannot take away the gift I gave you because I'm a god, but I can put a curse on you. So you are going to be able to foretell the future, but people are not going to believe you. And in fact, that happens. And I think that the Academy of Pediatrics and many people in academia and scholars and doctors and others suffer from the Cassandra curse, that we can predict pretty much what's going to happen if the trajectory remains the same, but we're not believed by society, by the media, by the politicians. So that's the story of Cassandra. So am I my brother's keeper? I say to you, yes. And with that, I thank you. Thank you. I'll be happy to entertain questions, pushback, opinion, please. Oh, come on. Yes.
Well, I think you left us all speechless.
Thank you. Except you.
I mean, I
Thank
feel
you.
overwhelmed by what you've said, and I'm in tears.
Thank you.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's, I'll answer your question in a minute. There was another one over here. Did I see? Yes?
I guess I'll jump in. I was just curious what's being done to get messages out to the general public. I know you're reaching tens of thousands of doctors every day, but people like us who don't get to sit down with you and see the faces of the children who are affected, how do we get those stories up to everybody in America?
Well, I think that the only thing we cannot do, absolutely cannot do, is remain silent. And this is a quote that I have heard attributed to many, but you may have heard it, that in the Divine Comedy, when Antonio is taken to the darkest place in hell, the guide says, and this, the hottest place in hell, is reserved for the people that in the face of indignity remained silent, did nothing. And that has been used by politicians, and Kennedy used it, and Luther King used it in different ways. But I do believe, and we asked that question ourselves when we went there, so what is a bunch of pediatricians? You saw a lady and an older man, and then one older than the older man, that was me. And what can we really do? Well, what we're doing first is telling the story. Because when you look at the terrible tragedies that have happened, from AIDS to the Holocaust, silence was one of the things that facilitated that disaster. We have convinced a few reporters, and certainly we're getting more and more coverage. Slowly we're getting it. Last weekend in the New York Times, there was an editorial by Krugman on the Republican war on families and children, because a lot of this is the result, and I don't think that any of them are really wanting to hurt families and children, but they are acting in a way that is hurting families and children. And I think that there hasn't been a reflection, because the hyper-partisan rhetoric that has settled into our nation, both at a state and a federal level, is not allowing reason to prevail over passions. So for the moment, the Academy is doing what you saw. We're writing editorials, we're energizing, and our people, particularly our young people, are energized. For example, we have 2 legislative conferences in Washington every year when we invite about 120 people to come, and we train them in doing advocacy with legislators. That was about the average attendance. Twice a year, 120 came. Last year, for the first one, I'm sorry, this year in 2016, the first one, we had 400 applicants. So we had to double the size. The second one was the same. So, and people are like calling and writing us and saying what you just did. What can we do? So I think that at a medical level, I think that at least we have the flame lit. But in academic environments, I think that we haven't really picked up on what's brewing at a humanitarian level. So thank you for your questions. And yes, sir.
In Rhode Island, we have a thing called the Medical Legal Partnership.
Yes.
It started a few years ago in Boston, and as many good things do, they spread down Route 95. And now families who are here regardless of their legal status, who make it into our pediatric services, get the assistance of the legal community. I wonder, what are you doing to reach out to our friends, members of the bar and academics in the law schools in Texas?
Two things. First of all, the Medical Legal Partnership is working with the chapters in New York and in this area, and Pat Flanagan, my colleague who's a district vice chair, may know a little more details about it, but they are definitely working with the immigrant groups of pediatricians that are working with that population, representing them in court. And here, but wanted to mention, in Texas, there is a group of women whose name I am blocking on, who are a number of pro bono female lawyers that are representing, but what happens, they are willing to do it, but the system of notification, how can they get engaged to go represent Child A in Amarillo, Texas, on the 23rd of November when he's supposed to appear in court? And in large states, that's a real challenge. But it's part of, yes, Alejandro.
Fernando, this is the second time that I listen to this, and this is really breaks my heart. It tears my heart because one of the problems is the climate of indignity that this country, under this administration, has bring to us is unbelievable. After Newtown, after the killing of all those kids, nothing happened. I mean, I'm really disillusioned with the whole situation here. Look at what happened with all the economic maneuvers that they're doing. What New York Times has just recently published, last week. The thing that NAFTA brought to Mexico is obesity, diabetes, hypertension, And when we think about all the manipulations that General Kelly and all these partisan situation is unbelievable to me. And how is that going to change? I think we live in two countries now in the United States. I'm an American citizen by choice, and I came to this country 41 years ago, like as you. I'm ashamed of the people, the leadership in government in this country. It's pathetic. There's no compassion. There is no dignity to protect us. And what do we cater in academic institutions, Harvard, Brown, Columbia? We're looking now for the doctoral practice of RBUs, how much money you bring, you cater to the Middle East. And in our doorsteps, we have all these kids that they're dying, and then they're dying alive, which is the worst thing. They don't die of diseases. They die of things that the political system is doing to that. So you wonder, what is going to happen to this country. It's really sad to see that, because the leadership is corrupted. It's absolutely corrupted to the core. And if we don't change that political situation, it's going to be doing the same thing. How are these kids coming from countries like Guatemala? And we work in the mountains with Fernando many years ago. I worked particularly with the American missionaries. I mean, the conditions still are prevalent, the economic imbalances, the given to the rich, more like that. Look at what happened with the tax that is going to pass, no question about. And the respect to the morals and the compass and the backbone of the country. I hope I'm wrong, but today they're going to elect probably a rapist in Alabama, which to me is unbelievable. And that is just the climate and the state. I don't want to be totally pessimistic, but I really, it's hurtful when you see a beautiful country, nice people, that is going into this situation here. And all these manipulations and all this misinformation, all this fake news, that is something that has rotten the core and the principles of this country. It's really sad. And I hope that we carry that message one by one. It's very difficult to change people, but I try to do that with every patient that I see in the very high elite practice that we have in this country. So thank you,
We're going to
Fernando,
break
for
now
that.
for a commercial. He's not a plant. I think that it is better to light a candle than to curse darkness. And I think that, yes, we can feel that desperation, but we can't stay there. We have to move. We have to talk about it. I was so happy to be invited to this group because it's outside of of my comfort zone. And I am very touched about being here. When I told my institution that I was being invited to the School of Anthropology, they asked me if I was coming as a specimen. And I asked them to no, it's to speak. But I think that we need to expand the conversation. Certainly, many of you I know, because Andrea gave me the map, are working on these issues at different levels and different sides of the elephant, using the blind men metaphor. But I don't want to keep you longer than you intended. This really has been a privilege. Thank you for spending time and coming to listen to me, and thank you very much for your hospitality. Thanks.